Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Mindset Elevation Coach and publisher of Aspire Magazine, Linda Joy. And I don't know about you, but I think sometimes we are so hard on ourselves, right? Trying to create the perfect life, the perfect relationship, the perfect body. And that can really cause us to experience a lot of self-doubts, self-judgment, and so much more. And that's why I am so excited today to have a good friend of mine, Nanci Reed, here with us to talk about embracing our perfectly imperfect selves, why it's important, and so much more. As a self-worth coach, author of an amazing, extraordinary book, ladies, you got to get Happily Ever Now, Not After Everything Else is Perfect, a gentle guide for overcoming the paralysis of perfectionism by embracing our innate guidance. She's also a spiritual teacher and quantum manifestation specialist. She supports heart-centered, sensitive, intuitive, and successful women to value their self at the level of their biggest dream, not their doubts, which we all have a tendency to do, and to do so even before their dream fully comes true. She supports women to do that without the paralysis of perfectionism, imposter syndrome, self-judgment, or comparisons by using, and I love this, and we're going to talk about this today, deliberate kindness and curiosity as the cornerstones to invite that transformation and manifestation on every level into their lives. Welcome, Nanci.
Hi, Linda. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I have your book in my hand, and we were just talking offline, like, girl, this got to become a course. And so why don't we start with, like, talk about that perfectly imperfect self? Because remember when I first met you, I said, oh, that is so powerful of a phrase. It's like a soul permission slip. So let's talk about that for a moment. What led you to wanting to do that work of helping people embrace that? Was it your own journey?
Absolutely. Yeah. They always say that we teach best what we most need to learn. And I definitely needed to learn how to embrace being my perfectly imperfect self and to let go of that fruitless pursuit of perfectionism. And that's the thing that really was the greatest awakening for me and what I've seen as so transformative with my clients is that when you take perfection off the table, then everything else is available to you. It's like everything is accessible and available infinitely, and that the only thing that is truly impossible is perfection, and everything else is possible.
It's so true, isn't it? Because perfectionism, as you and I know, and I'm like you, I've had to go through my own journey with that. It doesn't even exist.
No, it doesn't. And that's just it. It's like the basically a way of biding our time that actually is under the form of procrastination, but underlying it is really fear. And that there's a lot of self-judgment and a lot of comparison and a lot of shame and blame. And it's really that inner perfectionist within us that keeps on telling us that if we just keep trying harder, if we just keep checking off one more box that the world has said is necessary in order to be worthy of being seen and heard, and to know that our light is needed and matters, then everything will be perfect. And the thing is we end up, to borrow a phrase from Alice in Wonderland, that we end up running as fast as we can to stay in place. And so we never actually feel that sense of accomplishment, that sense of being enough. And we're always feeling as though we're coming up short. And when you instead embrace this idea of that, well, what if my goal is imperfection? What if my goal is to be the perfectly imperfect me? Well, then that means that every experience and every interaction, every relationship, every moment that you interpret is either a lesson or a blessing. And there's no denial involved in it. You're looking, but with a different lens. And so instead of looking with preconceived judgment and assumptions and comparisons, you're looking with, like I like to say, deliberate kindness and curiosity instead.
Just even here in the description, it just speaks to my truth. And what you said is how it shows up for me. It would show up as I was never in the present moment back in my 30s and 40s. I was always chasing the next goal. And so of course I was never here, which means I wasn't truly happy because I wasn't present in my own life. Do you notice those who struggle with perfectionism and self-judgment, they are not in the now? Was that your experience?
Yes, 100%. That they're either operating from living from a limiting belief from their past, or feeling that somehow they need to atone for it, or that somehow it is now defining what is available to them as their present, or they're in this state of anxiety and anticipation of something in the future based upon something from their past. So either way, they're not being present in the now moment. And the great thing is that there's always another now, right? So that if you're in the now right now and you're feeling like, yes, I am ready, and then there's that self doubt or something else that creeps up, be aware of it rather than deny it, and look at it with compassion and gentleness rather than judgment. And then tell yourself it's okay. That next now, which might be right now, is the now that you're going to choose as the perfectly imperfect time. So it's no longer about waiting for a perfect time to show up because it's never going to come. It's literally like standing at the train station and waiting for that train to show up, and it's never gonna arrive because you will have missed it because it's already there, you know? And so it's a really kind of weird thing to describe when we live in such a linear society where everything is based upon time passing in only a linear fashion. But when you embrace more of like a quantum physics perspective, where you have the past, present, and future occurring at the same instant, and then you're getting to choose to access it as the only time that exists, which is now, that actually then allows you to align with this perfect imperfection because you're also aligning with that as your dreams and the life that you're wanting is seemingly unfolding right now. It's also already unfolded on a higher level.
I love this. And it's something that you said too is from the past. If I go back to 30 years when I was pushing, chasing, striving in my first business, it was exactly that. Now, of course, hindsight's 2020. I didn't know it then, but getting all the business awards, always giving to my time to women and children's organizations, it was coming from a wound. Again, hindsight's 2020, but it was coming from a wound. All that pushing, chasing, striving was if I win another award, if I become successful in business, then I'm worthy.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you hear this from many clients that get caught in that. It almost cost me my life. I had a stroke at 40. That's 22 years ago, ladies, so a long time ago. But I had to review, like, where is this coming from? This desire that I got to fill up every single moment because I'm going to miss something or I'm not worthy. So does worthiness play like an underlying part that you see in your work with clients?
Yes, 100%. And so the thing is, if somebody is going to talk to someone that is feeling like that life is just not serving them the best at this moment, and you're going to tell them that, okay, all you need to do is start practicing self-love. And let's say these affirmations every day. And let's, do these things that are about self-care and self-awareness and self-discovery. Well, that's all very well and fine, but if that individual, if she doesn't feel as though she's worthy on a very, very, very deep level beyond time and space of actually receiving that kindness, receiving that compassion and that grace, because she is defining herself by her past and not her present, and she hasn't looked at her past with that healing and that gentleness rather than that judgment, then all of those platitudes are just going to fall on very, very, very deaf ears, even if she has the very best intentions. So I have seen in my own life and in those of the women that I've supported that when you can help someone look at their belief system around their inherent worthiness, and you can explore the idea that our self net worth, that's actually priceless. That value is only determined by an internal validation, and that nothing external can touch that.
Yeah.
And when you actually look at that, and you can look at it again with gentleness and with kindness rather than judgment, now you can say, okay, so this is where I've been. And this is the reason that these choices showed up for me. They were serving a purpose. It looked like they were serving a purpose of keeping me safe by having me play small, by having me hide my light, by having me literally hide in plain sight. But guess what? I can be extremely grateful to that part of me, even though it might not have ended up in the outcome that was the most ideal for me. I can be grateful to that part of me that thought it was coming from a place of wanting to protect me. So I'm going to express genuine gratitude towards it. And that's actually going to allow me to dispel it and to instead choose differently and choose a different mindset, and to look at that maybe there's another way to determine my value. Maybe it's not about the externals. Maybe it's about having that internal conversation with that inner voice, that highest expression of me, and hearing what she has to say rather than everything outside of me.
Oh, such a beautiful way of putting it. And it all speaks as to truth for me and going back on my journey way back then. So we're going to take a quick break, Nancy, and I want to dive deeper into that too, and also talk about sustainable happiness, right? Because it's something that you teach and talk about, and I think it's so important for our listeners to get your wisdom on that. So, ladies, we're going to be back in a moment. I am with self-worth coach, best-selling author Nanci Reed. You can learn more at nancireed.com, and that's Nancy with an I. We'll be back in a moment, my friends.
Inspiration for a Woman's Soul. Aspire Magazine, inspiring and supporting women on the path of self-discovery. Claim your free digital subscription today, which includes access to thousands of dollars of personal development bonus gifts from Team Inspiration partners. Claim your Aspire Magazine subscription today at subscribetoaspire.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm with Nanci Reed, and today we're talking about embracing our perfectly imperfect selves, how to embrace gentleness, kindness, life with curiosity. And right before the break, Nancy, you just beautifully described about learning to validate our worth from the inside out instead of the outside in. And I'm paraphrasing with my words, but I think that's so powerful, and it does. It mirrors my own personal experience, but you have a way of beautifully putting them into words. So you also teach a lot and talk a lot and write a lot about sustainable happiness. So what was your own journey towards that, and what have you found to be the most significant practices that help maintain happiness?
Well, so once again, we teach best what we most need to learn. And
Yeah.
I had spent many, many, many years looking for happiness outside of me. And I believed that it was in receiving that perfect relationship, or in having so many followers on my social media, or in having so many external friendships, or, all these different things, or having a quote unquote perfect body, or, the most beautiful face, or the perfect skin, or whatever it was, always coming from that idea that our imperfections actually were something to hide. And and so there was this sense of always waiting for happiness. And so as I was writing my book, which was a 7-year process,
You know?
I had this experience where after a meditation, I had a basically a visualization where I was presented with my book. And this is like when I was feeling all this writer's block, and I was like, "Oh, what am I even writing about?" And here I am, I'm talking about overcoming perfectionism, I think, but like I keep on trying to make this perfect book. And so how hilarious is this? I can't write about something if I can't actually practice. And so in this vision, I was shown my book, and I saw it all, the cover, the title, which I'd already had kinda come to a decision on before that after a session with a client, where I was speaking to her and I was saying, I just had this feeling that it's time for you to stop waiting and for you to instead start creating your happily ever now, not after everything else is perfect." And she was like, "Wait, what? What did you just say?" And I was like, "I don't know, happily ever now." And she's like, "Yes, that, you need to talk about that." And so I was like, "Oh, maybe that's the name of my book." But I still didn't really know how it was all going to come together. And so then in this vision, to see the book, see the cover, see the image on the cover, and then to see it open and see it having all the pages filled out. And then I heard very clearly this inner voice, or like what I like to call my quantum elder self. And she said, "It's already written." And that basically I got to decide when I was ready to access that memory and to accept that I was worthy of the memory, that it was already complete. And what that did was so profound, and I've shared that with so many people that are on their own book journeys and are struggling with writer's block and everything else, because when you approach something as though it's a living memory in your present, then what you're doing is you're tapping into that quantum energy, and you're also giving yourself full permission to enter into that state of curiosity rather than judgment. Because now you're not operating on wondering when or if it's going to unfold, but you're instead getting to choose to remember and access the choices and the people that you talk to. And so there's such comfort and resting in that certainty. And it changed my entire process. And I just let go from that moment about the timing. And it was more about the, oh, my book is going to be finished right on time. And the people that are meant to receive it are going to. And it needs to show up exactly this way, because that is the way that it's already been completed. And it was like this just absolute golden ticket permission slip that I wrote between myself and that elder self version of me, which actually is the same me, and we integrated as I was writing. And so that to me is how you can approach the idea of lasting and sustainable happiness, because you get to become the gentle agent of your experience. And that when you take perfection off the table, like I've said, then everything else is available to you. And so now you getting to experience sustainable happiness is always possible because you're coming at it from a perfectly imperfect mindset instead.
And I love the name you have for your elder self. And I just love that wisdom you shared. And, I'm a book publisher, so I always tell my authors, we've published 300 women. I say, you already know your story. You've lived your story. Get out of your head and into the essence, and you will be back in your story and it will flow onto the page. But as you just speak so eloquently, by the way.
Thank you.
You just shared that the moment you co-created with, I call mine my divine support team. I have numerous ones. Yeah, I have numerous ones that I call in for different things. They've been with me for so long, but I loved how you open to receive what is already a part of you. Your elder self, that beautiful name you
Mhm.
gave, is already a part of you. And do you believe also that we all have access to that? We may call it something different, but that higher version of ourselves.
100%. And that all comes from looking at that foundational core belief of worthiness.
Yes.
So when you fully have embraced that you are worthy, then you're more open to receiving those gentle taps and nudges of your intuition, those gentle invitations to access things as though it is a memory. And so it doesn't mean that you don't have free will still. It doesn't mean you don't have choices, but it just means that you can rest in the certainty of arriving at the destination and that you already have. And so now you just get to choose, well, what was the next step I took today? And so I love it. I actually call my quantum elder self Sparkle Feather. And so and so she and we communicate daily, and I'll basically be talking to her. And then what I realized though is that we're not separate. She's
No.
just basically an extension of me. And that when I'm fully in my light, when I'm fully ready to show up without any fear of visibility, without any need to hide in plain sight, then she and I are one. And we always are. And I get to choose when I'm ready to remember that. And again, if my intention is perfectly imperfect, then there'll be days that I forget. There'll be days that I'll start wallowing in self pity or be worried about things. But I can look at those moments that are much less frequent than they used to be with compassion and gentleness. And I know that it doesn't negate from any of the progress that I've made. All it is it's just part of my story. And I can reframe that instead of thinking it's a detour from my path. I like to call them purposeful redirections because that's what they are. There's always a purpose. And we get to choose what lens we're seeing that purpose through. Is it one of reflecting our integration with our light and with our quantum elder self, or whatever you want to call it, divine team? It doesn't matter. Just that remembrance of what you truly are, not who you are, but what you truly are at the essence level. Or are you choosing a purpose to reinforce the idea of smallness and of separation, of all of those things? And again, when you can look at that decision and you see, oh, you know what? I did choose to play small here, but then you're compassionate about it. It's as though you're at that same moment holding on to that hand of your elder self rather than that smaller inner perfectionist.
Yeah, and I think it's so powerful. And what came to me is, and I wish I could give attribution, but there's two forces in the world, fear and love. You're always either reacting from fear or responding from love. And that's the energy of what I just heard in your message, right? We're
Mhm,
going to slide back occasionally because
mhm.
we live in this world, we're human. But having that non-judgment when we do and gentle compassion, go, oh, okay, you were in wallowing, that's okay. You have the tools to come back into the truth of who you are. So I love that because we get get to choose, right? We get to choose our thoughts. We're not victims to our thoughts. That was my
Right.
number one big life transformation moment when I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I get to choose. If I don't like how something feels, I can choose a new thought. That happened during my spiritual awakening in 91, and that was pivotal. And now I love teaching that. So you again, once again, just beautifully um, explain like sustainable happiness. We're going to take another break and we're going to come back. We're going to talk about deliberate kindness because you recently did, once again, 32 favors. So we're going to talk about deliberate kindness and your 32 favors project when we come back. I'll be back in a moment, my friends. Visit Nanci at nancireed.com. Again, that's Nanci with an I. And while you're there, she has a sacred gift for you. It's called Align with Love Self-Healing Gift Set. You'll find that on her website. It's complimentary. Grab it and align with love, my friends. We'll be right back.
Your truest, deepest desires are calling you. The question is, will you answer the call? Former high-tech Fortune 500 leader Sharon Seberg knows how it feels to wear busyness as a badge of honor and to smother her dreams with the expectations of others. Walking away from her successful yet unfulfilling career, she chose to live a life connected to her intuitive wisdom and divine truth, and now lives a life of fulfillment, peace, and abundance. Today, Sharon is a neurotransformational coach, feminine power facilitator, and the visionary founder of the Soul Alignment Formula. She empathetically fuses cutting-edge neuroscience with intuitive coaching, supporting successful women to unlock their full potential so they can live a life of authenticity and freedom. Are you ready to excavate your deepest desires and bring them to life? Start by visiting SharonSeberg.com.
You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm so honored that you have been circled up with myself and Nanci today. We're talking about embracing our perfectly imperfect selves, sustainable happiness, and so much more. So, a big part of your message is deliberate kindness, and you recently did a 32 favors project that was really all about promoting deliberate acts of kindness. Let's start with that because I know there's a little backstory of when you first created it. So tell them what it is and then how it was created.
Okay, so 32 favors is just like you were saying, a deliberate kindness project. There's nothing random about it. Even though you may or may not be interacting with people that you have previous relationships with, there's still a deliberate choice and an intentionality underlying the kindness. So, where it started was 15 years ago. Can't even believe that. 2009, when I was living in Los Angeles and I was brand new to the City of Angels. I didn't really know that many people. And yet I had this dream in my heart to have my own business. And so I managed to find an apartment and I had a studio where I was teaching Pilates and I was also seeing coaching clients. And basically, I had done everything that I possibly knew how to do to find new people to come to be my clients. I had literally walked up and down, for those of you that know, Ventura Boulevard in Los Angeles, like until I found a client when I first moved there. But it was also during the height of our recession, right? So many people had told me that I was crazy to try to start a business during a recession. Why wouldn't I just go work for somebody else? And I had done that. I had worked for other people. And I really felt that there was something inside of me that was meant to have this business by myself and to really have that entrepreneurial heart. And so I really believed in what I had to offer. And I thought that I had something very unique to share within the modalities that I was serving clients. And yet here I was where my rent was due. And basically, I was like, wow, after I pay my rent on my studio and my apartment, I don't really know where any other money is going to come from. I'm either going to have to beg my parents, you know, and yes, they were right. I shouldn't have started a business during a downturn, or that I'm going to need to, go add more letters after my name and go back to school. That was another option that I let myself reconsider, or go work for somebody else, right? So these are all possible viable options. And so I was just about to give my notice on my studio and to my apartment. And then for whatever reason, I just had this moment where once again, I've always been highly intuitive and highly empathic, where I just felt this gentle nudge of like, why don't you just go take a nap for a little bit before you make any choices? And so I went back to my apartment and I took a nap. And during this nap, I had this really incredible lucid dream. And during this dream, I was running a race. And what was significant was it was a high hurdles race. Now, my father was born in Budapest, Hungary, and he was a championship high hurdler, actually the junior national champion. And so he had always tried to get me to follow in his footsteps, literally. And I was too afraid of the hurdles. I would run up to them and I would either fall after I would try to go over them, or I would just stop and not even try because I was so frightened of them. So it was like, well, why am I being shown this in my dream? And so I, tried to run, and then lo and behold, I fell in the dream. And I was on the ground and I was pretty beaten up. And then it became very clear to me as I was observing the dream, knowing that I was dreaming, that, well, so this dream figure of me, she has a choice right now. She can either stay on the ground and basically just be overcome with her pain, or she can get back up and do the best she can. And that's the only way she's going to see what's on the other side of that finish line at the end of the track. And so the dream figure as me got back up and began to run. And I wish I could say that I got better. I didn't. I kept falling and I kept getting up. And so I was fully, aware of everything that was happening. And eventually I crossed the finish line. And when I crossed the finish line, definitely not anywhere close in the top, finishers, I had this experience where it was almost like a life review, which I had had before that during a very, traumatic car accident and near death experience, where I was shown in this instant all of these different people that I soon realized were across different aspects of time, so past, present, and future, and that they were wearing different types of clothing, they were speaking different languages, and I was being shown them all at once. And the thing that I gathered from looking at this scene was that all of them shared a commonality of being in some sort of pain. And I remember as I was standing there, I was like, well, what can I do? I'm just one person. Like how what? This is overwhelming. And then once again, I heard that inner voice within me that is me say, you have your hands, you have your feet, just start, and you have your voice. And so I went and I interacted with each of these aspects of time and these individuals. And what was so interesting was me observing the dream itself, the images, including me in the dream, got lighter. And then I woke up and I was like, why was I shown this? Like what kind of profound thing was I just presented with? Because I knew there was a great message in it. And so I began to start to write at my computer. And this is when blogging was still pretty new. And so I had started this blog and I started writing about the dream. And as I was talking about the dream and processing it, like basically as I was typing, I came up with this idea where it was like, okay, so rather than wallow at home for these next, oh, I don't know, 30 days or so that I have my rent paid, why don't I put the thing that I have an abundance of right now, which is my time, and see it as valuable? Even if I don't have a lot in my bank account, and even if my business isn't succeeding right now to the level I'd like it to, I still have me. I still have my time. I have my hands, my feet, and my voice. So I came up with this idea that for 32 days, which is one day longer than the longest month of any, of any month, that I would commit to being an emissary of deliberate kindness on behalf of others. And so for the next 32 days, I did a favor a day on behalf of others. And what was so incredible was by the end of these 32 days, and I blogged about the experience, my whole life had changed unintentionally. And looking back upon it, I realized it was a huge quantum manifestation tool that I never expected. And so by the end of the 32 days, I had a waiting list of clients. I had connected with people in the City of Angels that everyone said is out for themselves that were lovely and are still in my immediate circle of contacts. And I had such a different interpretation of my inherent value just in being me, that all of it was transformative on every level. And so I wanted to be able to share that experience with others, particularly if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like that everything you've done basically you're running as fast as you can to stay in place. That when you come from a place of seeing your time as valuable, what begins with giving kindness deliberately to others, you're actually always experiencing that intentionality and effect of that essence within yourself. And so you're not separate from the kindness, you're actually an extension and expansion of it. And by sharing more, you're actually creating more. You lose nothing in the process.
So beautiful. And I didn't know that part of the story back in 2009. So I'm like, oh my God, you've had a lot of beautiful spiritual experiences. And let me see what time it is. We still have 2 minutes before the next break. You just did the 32 Favors Project within your Facebook community. And
Mhm.
share the name of your Facebook group for those listening who may want to look you up, my friend.
It is called Sparkle Circle.
And that's on Facebook. It's a Facebook group, ladies. And no surprise that it's called Sparkle when you have Sparkle Feather as a guide. And you should see her posts. They're always so beautiful. And so I invite everyone to look her up on Facebook in groups called Sparkle Circle. You'll see her beautiful image and you'll know you're in the right place. So you know what we'll do? We're going to take our break now. We come back. We're going to come back for the last segment. And we'll talk a little bit more about um, overcoming perfectionism and imposter syndrome in the last segment. We'll be back, my friends. I really invite you tap into the loving essence of who Nanci is, her offerings, and so much more. She is, again, the author of Happily Ever Now, Not After Everything Else is Perfect. You can get it at all online booksellers. Grab a copy today. I have to tell you just some of the chapters, just so you know. Is like a 1 week mindset makeover, 12-week self-healing journey. There is impossible things before breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like it is a guide, a really gentle guide to help you overcome the paralysis of perfectionism. So again, that's Nanci with an I, Reed.com. We'll be back in a moment for our last segment.
Are you ready to invite more gentleness and less judgment into your life? Self-worth coach Nanci Reed, longtime teacher and facilitator of A Course in Miracles, supports successful, empathic, and mission-driven women to embrace their perfectly imperfect self with curiosity and gentleness. She holds loving space and compassionately guides women to learn to trust the wisdom of their soul and live from their dreams, not their perceived limitations, and to quiet the voice of their inner perfectionist so they can hear their inner voice. Nanci is a popular media guest and author of the award-winning book Happily Ever Now, Not After Everything Else is Perfect, a gentle guide for overcoming the paralysis of perfectionism by embracing our innate guidance. For supportive resources, inspiring content, and to join her Sparkle Circle Facebook community, visit NanciReed.com.
Thanks for circling up with me and my special guest, Nanci Reed, today. It's been a truly empowering, inspiring, and magical conversation. So Nanci, in our last segment, I'll keep an eye on the time. Let's talk about imposter syndrome because I know from my own journey and with clients, if we're struggling with imposter syndrome, it's because we're stuck in perfectionism. Have you found that for yourself and with your clients?
100%.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah,
who am I?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah, who am I to
exactly.
write a book? Who am I to speak about this? Who am I to start? It's like we are always keeping ourselves small because of that perfectionism that we talked about. So, what is? I think we have time for like one or two short, gentle strategies that you can recommend for overcoming these barriers.
So one thing that can be really helpful is to look at your language that you use with yourself. And so a lot of times when you're stuck in that place of imposter syndrome, there's a real sense, again, of not feeling worthy or of having enough validation. And so you're constantly seeking approval from others outside of you. And so a lot of times when you're in that space of imposter syndrome, you're also really defensive about yourself because you don't really believe fully in your own ability and your own capacity for success. And so when other people ask you questions, which may or may not be from an innocent intention, we'll assume the best. But that, I'm thinking back to when people would ask me about my book and they'd be like, gosh, you've been writing that for so long. So when are you going to be finished with it? And I would immediately respond. Now, this is prior to me having that vision, right?
Yeah.
Of being able to experience it and know it was already written. So before that, when people would say that, I would give something sort of stuttering and stammering, like, I think that yeah, I will have that book done maybe in the next 6 months, year, something like that. And I would basically be responding to their question with a question. So I wouldn't be affirming any sort of truth, any sort of clarity. And then what shifted for me after having that vision and really continuing to write the book and then live the book as I was writing it too, responded instead with, I know my book will be finished right on time. And that those that are meant to read it will have it find them right on time.
Yeah.
And then there was such a difference between the two types of responses. And then what was so interesting was that the people that were asking me the questions, the responses from them were so different. So when I would respond with a question to a question, they would usually give me their advice. They would make a judgment. They would somehow try to fix something about what I had said or how I was doing it. But when I came from knowing, they were silent. And usually they would either affirm what I had just said or they'd be like, "Oh, yeah. Okay. Sounds good." And there was a total difference in the way that I felt too. So I felt that I needed no defense. And so I didn't have to see their question as an attack that needed defense too. So it was really, really, really interesting and a big shift for me. And so that can be really helpful to look at our language. And again, we're looking with curiosity, not with judgment. And then another thing that can be really helpful is when you're feeling that imposter syndrome want to take over, is you can do something where you are looking, but with a different lens at everything in your life. And so the thing is that ordinarily when we're operating from perfectionism, we are looking through a lens that wants to highlight our flaws and all the ways that we're not measuring up, or it wants to basically negate our authority and our agency of being decision makers in our own lives that are empowered rather than at the effect of others outside of us. And so, if instead you can try on this fun experiment that I call a lens of love, where for one, maybe hour, even 1 minute, if you want to try, you look at everything around you in your room. And you only do it though with your dominant eye first. And so with your dominant eye, you are only going to be able to perceive through a lens of love. So, in other words, only things that are going to be supportive of your agency, of your authority, of your truth. And that's the only thing that's going to allow your interpretations. And then you cover up that dominant eye, and now you allow the other eye to look at the very same things that you just saw and just interpreted. But now you get to see it the way that you normally do through your perfectionism. And so you're going to look at something and realize that if I have these two different interpretations, then there is always another way that I can choose to see things. So it reminds you of your internal agency. And then if you really want to take this to the next level and you're feeling very, very, very gentle in your intention, go stand in front of a mirror and do the same experiment. So cover up that non-dominant eye and only look with your dominant eye and only see and interpret from a lens of love. And
Mm,
then cover that up and look at it with the other eye, the way that you normally do. And notice the difference between looking at the very same thing and yet having two completely different interpretations.
I love that because it puts the choice in our hands, right? Because as you said,
Mhm.
when you realize there's two ways of looking at things, we get to choose. But we go through life when we're stuck in that pattern, thinking there's only one thought, which is like the imposter thoughts and all of that. So those are two beautiful exercises. So the first one was watch your language. And then the second strategy was to look at situations with a new lens by showing both and then choosing. Of course, we're always going to choose love. Once we become aware, it's like, why would I want the other thing? I'll take this version, please, right? And so
Exactly.
that is so beautiful. So I want to invite everyone again, as we come to the last final minutes, is visit NanciReed.com, grab her Align with Love Self-Healing gift set. You will be so grateful that you do, and that way you stay connected with Nanci for all the magic and magical offerings that she has coming up. Join her in her, I got to tell you, I'm in there, ladies. So her magical Facebook group, Sparkle Circle. And we have about 1 minute. Nanci, would you like to leave everyone with a quick last minute words of wisdom?
Sure. All I would say is that now is always the perfectly imperfect time to begin living your own happily ever now, not after everything else is perfect.
Mm, I love that. I can remember when I first received your book and saw the title. I had the same feeling your client did that day when you said it to me, because we're always, the world has us chasing happiness. And when you read that title, and ladies, when you read the book, you'll know what I mean. It's an automatic, like I have it in my hands now. It's an automatically reminder is right now, be here now. Happiness is within you. It isn't out there. Um, it's a beautiful reminder, and the cover is beautiful too, by the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, ladies, until next time, choose love, choose joy, choose happiness. Blessings, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.